On the show today, Tracy Seed. So Tracy's a coach, a trainer, coming from background MVC, NLP, biodancer. I actually interviewed Tracy once before, and the some weird technical glitch meant that it didn't record properly. So we're going again because, stubborn. So Tracy, welcome back.
Hello. Hi, Mark. Yeah. Glad to be here again.
You said you're up a mountain today, is that right?
I am actually, yeah. I'm in Mount Pelion in Greece.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Really lovely here.
Kalimera to all our Greek listeners. Not very many of them, but hello anyway to them. Okay, so how did you get interested in the body? Tell us the beginning of your body journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always want to, when you asked me last time, and I'm going to start there again, I always want to start from the beginning just thinking as a young child that, being in the body is our nature, it's our natural state. And as a young child, I had a secure upbringing, which was great, and lots of time, really feeling confident in my body. I had brothers, there were 5 of us, so I had quite a big family, lots of cousins, and spent a lot of time outside. So lots of rough and tumble, climbing, running, all that kind of stuff, and felt a really good sense of belonging. So it's kind of that's where it started for me, without any consciousness, I guess where it starts for all of us, And then moving into my teenage years, right through to my 30s, really. Life was more difficult. I mean, it often is for teenagers anyway, but I had a couple of traumas. My father died, which was a big one, had a big impact on our family. And I had another incident where I was kind of entrapped by somebody, and then all sorts of stories to tell about, taking risks in the teenage years and bit of drug use and getting expelled from school. But alongside that, I think I had a lot of sort of droplets, if you like, of input around embodiment, because my parents were teachers of meditation, and that was very unusual in those days.
Right. That's pretty early days for this stuff, right? Like, if you were a child in Brighton today, maybe not so weird, but growing up in the south of England, I'm imagining at least 40 years ago, should we say, Tracy?
60s, 70s. Yeah, it was very
strange. Yeah.
What did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Unusual.
Yeah, it was. It was very unusual, and also, my oldest sister, she married a guy called Michael Gelb, who wrote one of the first books on sort of body learning. And he was an Alexander teacher. And so he was in our family, and a family part, and I did things like juggling and always talking about energy and doing Aikido. And so I was this kind of really a bit lost, wayward teenager, and so were my brothers. But we did have them, we had kind of little droplets of this kind of awareness. And it was my sister that took me to my first alternative dance class rather than a kind of real, rave that I was going to. She took me to a class in Old Street with Michael Gabriel. Have you heard of him, Mark?
I haven't, no. What does he do?
No, he's really elderly now, but he used to run something called Changes. It was in the 80s, and it was like this... it was this really cool place, where it was totally new to me, where you could go and rave with no alcohol and dance the whole night, even sleep over at night. And it was, something really unusual. So she took me there. And I think that was my first experience of feeling like, God, I can feel really good without alcohol or getting stoned or something, because I was quite young. I was in my 20s. And also, she was obviously a really good mentor for me, my older sister. She invited me to a psychosynthesis course.
Very underrated and underknown organisation out just down Tooley Street, isn't it? Just next to the station.
Yeah. So we did a week's kind of introduction to psychosynthesis. I mean, she invited me because I was really unhappy, as a teenager and in a relationship that was quite unhealthy in a lot of ways, which was, again, not unusual for a girl that had been through a lot, I was working that all out in my relationship. And in that week, I think, I thought at the end of it, we observed people in therapy. I mean, I was the youngest. I was about 28 or something, I think, at that time. And they were all sort of in their 40s. And, we were observing people in therapy, and we had a session ourselves. And I actually remember in that session, it was catalytical for me, because I gave the therapist my heart, and she put it on, I put it on the chair, and it was so painful for me. And she said at the end of the session, "Would you like to take your heart back, Tracy?" And I said, "No." Mm-hmm. And I remember leaving there thinking, "Oh my God, I want my heart back." Mm-hmm. And so that kind of, that did start me on a journey. That started me on a journey because I went and had some psychotherapy and kind of dealt with the grief of losing my father. That was a big one. And that really manifested in my body, wailing, and had a therapist that was really supportive in helping me process that in a very embodied way. So, so that was one, not one, it was many kind of experiences. And then, do you want me to go on a bit?
Well, tell us how you got just sort of main professional areas. Let's kind of hear a little bit about, people might not know NVC, for example. They might not have even heard of it. It's widespread in some areas, but not others. So I'd love to hear about how you sort of got into that.
Yeah. Okay. So I was running, I got into, I was working in offices in the city, and then had my kids, and then I actually set up some preschools. So this was in the 1980s, and I, in fact, ran those right through to sort of 2006. I had a group of preschools. And in doing that, obviously I was studying child development, really interested in how kids learn, and also had a whole team of staff. So I had about 150 staff. And that was my journey into kind of leadership and wondering why people didn't do what you asked them to do, really trying to find ways of working as a team. So that's how I got into coaching and NLP, and also adult ed and training. And all of that led me into NVC, really, through a whole journey of NLP and meeting people and having friends that were also doing all this work. And then friends of mine saying, we met this guy, Marshall Rosenberg, is coming to London. Do you want to come to a day with him? So that was the day that Marshall, who was the creator of Nonviolent Communication, came to London. And that was really something. I mean, I heard him speak, and I realised that I just still wasn't peaceful inside. I think that was my main thing. Although I was going there for, okay, this is for my work and professionally, and I can bring this into the workplace. And of course, I wanted to do that, and I did that. But I realised that I still wasn't peaceful, and he had something to teach me. Uh-huh. And so I followed him on sort of intensive courses. And actually, Mark, I wondered, were you on a course in Switzerland with him?
No, I met him in the slums of Brazil. I was working with street kids in the slums of Brazil, let's see, about 15 years ago. And he did a training there, and we had a conversation with him. And I trained with various people in the UK you may know, like Shanta Gabra.
Yeah, I know that you have been involved in that community, that network really of trainers.
Maybe say a little bit about what NVC is, because it's it's a slightly strange title if you've never heard of it. Like, what do you mean violent? Does that mean not swearing at people? Does that mean not saying mean things? What's the heart of NVC?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's quite difficult, I think, to define NVC in just a sentence, but maybe a few sentences, or I'll say a few things about it. But for me, it's a way of being honest. Sometimes when things are challenging, I mean, that's one thing, and still keeping connection. It's about communicating in the fullness of yourself, with a focus on your needs and the other person's needs being really important and mattering. And because we haven't been educated in, well, that's the theory, and this is where we come from, and this is the teaching, is that mostly our education is education that separates us from our needs, our feelings and needs, and our emotional body, into judgments and evaluations of, who's right and who's wrong. And MVC is a way of, it's got 4 components of communicating with each other through clear observation about what happened, how you feel about what happened, and what needs or values are important to you and what we'd like to do about it. So that can be applicable in all sorts of situations. So I work with it in coaching and in organisations and, in various in schools with supporting conflict resolution. And I've been training since 2005 with Marshall, and I became a certified trainer I lose track a bit actually. I think it was 2014. I've forgotten exactly when, but I continue. I continue to learn all the time with MVC and to practice it all the time. Does that give some?
Maybe shall I say a few things I found useful in the approach?
I'd love you to.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. I'm not really like a hardcore MVC person, but I've taken away a few things. One that was really helpful was the difference between observations and evaluations. Mm-hmm. And like separating those out is often just a really good starting place for a conversation, I've found. And this is actually in classical business theory, talk about giving an appraisal. It's like, okay, what are the facts? What actually happened versus what's my opinion about that? And separating these two things out. I actually got to the point now where that for me is such a life skill. I find it a bit odd when people can't do that. Certainly it's more helpful to be able to in any kind of conflict, for example, or just in sort of getting things done in a business sense, and then the criticality of human needs and looking for the unmet needs in different situations that might seem aggressive or difficult on the surface, and trying to see the needs there. I found that very helpful. And this piece of making requests. So often I'll say at work, someone will be complaining or there'll be whatever, and I'll say, well, what's the request here? And that clarifying of, okay, what do you actually want, or what do I want? I find that super, super helpful. And then I think it was also my first contact with sort of a system that really stressed the power of listening and empathy. And that's still perhaps not my strong area, but it's one that I really recognize now as important.
Yeah, thanks. You've explained that really well. I find it invaluable really in all aspects of my life. And so it's wonderful to teach it because just like you've explained, really, I think those key elements really support people in their relationships, at work, at home, with their kids, And more recently, I've been working in some big corporations. That's new for me, with a woman called, not with her, I was working with her originally, but she wrote a book called The Empathy Factor. I don't know if you know that. Her name's Marie Miyashiro. And so we've been doing sort of some mindfulness along with empathy factors, but it's MVC broken down into really teachable behaviors and mindsets.
So maybe you could give an example from your own life of sort of MVC in action, as it were, because we've said some of the sort of main tenets of it now, maybe some of the theory, but can you give us an example of sometimes it's almost like before and after, isn't it? It was like, these were the judgments, these were the denial of responsibility. That's another one I think is underrated in terms of the potential violence of language. He made me hit him. There was nothing else I could do. The denial of responsibility is another one, as well as the sort of judgment one, isn't there? And then or complaining rather than expressing an actual complaint. It's too hot in here, rather than would you open the window? Like maybe is there any sort of concrete examples from your own life that you could kind of give us as sort of the two potential ways of doing it?
Yeah, I'm hesitating because I always think of my teenage grandson, I have said to him before, when I shared his picture in a workshop, is it okay with you that I share your picture? He said, why do you want to share my picture? I said, well, because you're one of my best teachers. So I guess he's okay with me sharing, I hope. So, but teenagers are the best teachers because they're always the ones that say to you things like you don't listen or you don't understand or, my mum's a cow or something or a bitch or, and so really being able to hear beyond what he's saying to his needs has been, and doing that in actually a normalized way of language. Because I think the thing with MVC, sometimes we learn what we call classic giraffe, which can sound quite clunky, it's kind of, isn't it? It's, when you came in at 9 o'clock this morning and I was expecting you at 10 because, that's the work schedule, I felt frustrated because, I have a need for teamwork and, that's kind of quite clunky.
Sound a bit artificial, can't it?
Exactly.
Willing is always the language, and people that have been on one MVC course can be quite annoying in my experience.
Yeah, me too. It can be really annoying, and people giving you empathy when you haven't asked for it. Just tuning right in, and all of a sudden deep empathy, and you're thinking, well, I didn't really want that right now. But I think kids, teenagers, kids, are the people that are our best teachers. And like I said, for him, for me, something like that would be, so, your mum's you're really getting, actually, I don't want to say it, sorry, Mark. I'm thinking because I'm worried that he might listen to it. So okay. I could think of another example, maybe.
Whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, I know this.
Yeah, I just realise all of a sudden, I'm really into preserving their privacy now and respecting. And sometimes, in private workshops, I talk about things and I tell them, but then I think it's a podcast. Ooh, he may feel a bit upset at me sharing.
So do you feel slightly concerned because you have a need for consideration, Tracy?
Yes, I do, and preserving his privacy, and respect.
Okay. Okay, and you talked about giraffe, so I should probably explain that. So in NVC is often traditionally taught with puppets or ears, kind of slightly silly, and giraffe versus jackal is often how it's isn't it? So this sort of language of the heart and giraffe and needs and feelings and requests and this kind of thing, rather than the judgments and the blame and the denial of responsibility.
Exactly.
It's quite playful often how it's taught, isn't it?
Yeah, and really effective. I do still use the puppets, not in every single situation, because, in some organisations or something, they don't seem so that they might be as acceptable. But, I think it's really helpful as a metaphor because the jackal is out. It's all about us and all about the way we hear and it's all about how we translate that. And so, somebody says she's a stupid cow, so that would be jackal is out. Translating that into giraffe might be something like, so are you wanting to understand, something that happened or something that she said? Mm-hmm. So giraffe, so jackal is out, is at somebody and it's judging and it's blaming and it's shaming. Jackal is in, is a critical voice to ourselves.
And this is really part of it, isn't it? It's quite important for a lot of the people I work with is I have a lot of clients that be quite hard on themselves, and it's how they speak to themselves they need to work on as much as how they speak to anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all those beliefs about ourselves and voices that we can translate into what are the unmet needs, what are our longings, what do we value, what's important to us. And that's what we use the giraffe metaphor for, because the giraffe has a strong heart as an animal and can see the whole landscape. That's some of the teaching and why we use that metaphor. And I understand, this is what I've learned sort of recently, is that a giraffe also mushes up kind of quite prickly food from an acacia plant. And so, if you've got judgments and things coming at you, to really be able to hear beyond that to the needs. And what the focus is connection, authentic connection, knowing that we all have, as human beings, no matter where we come from, the same universal needs to belong, to care, to mourn, to love.
And there's something wonderful in sort of realizing, isn't there, that like, oh wow, we all do have the same basic needs in a world that's very divided, in enemy images, as it were, everywhere. It's us and them, and to go, you know what, we do have this shared humanity. How does the body relate all to this then? This might sound like a very verbal system, and that's some people's understanding of MVC. We had a guy, David Weinstock, on ages ago, if listeners want another episode on this topic, who does embodied MVC, but I think all MVC really is embodied. What's your take on the sort of role of the body in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a technique, which is why it takes time to learn, because it's a consciousness, and it's really, our feelings are in our body. Our needs are showing up in our body, so they're not in our head. So taking time. I mean, for me, MVC cannot be separated from mindfulness, really, so that we take a breath to feel to have that spaciousness between what somebody says and how we might respond to that. I suppose in a way, like when I started giving that example of my grandson, I took a breath to just connect with what was alive in me around what needs were important.
Yeah.
To do that, I need to sink more deeply into my body, and to sense in my chest, in my heart, it goes right down to my belly, so that we connect. Marshall talks about, we're nice dead people that were walking around with our heads cut off, speaking intellectually all the time from our heads. This is taking us into the emotional body.
Right.
So that we're slowing it down and connecting and checking in with ourselves about what really matters. I think that's the most important thing.
Marshall Rosenberg had a very interesting embodiment when I met him, actually. He's now, sadly, but he had this big chest and this little head that sort of swiveled around on top, and he kind of didn't really look at you straight. He had a very particular way of sort of checking in with himself that was a bit weird, but it seemed to be the basis of some of his work. You know what I mean? Did you get that sense from him?
Yeah, he's an unusual guy. And I think he had, his own way of doing that. And definitely in trainings took quite some time, to just stop and take that pause. And I remember in the beginning not understanding what he was doing, when he put the giraffe ears on facing inwards. But that's what he was doing, connecting with himself. And I agree that sometimes it didn't seem like he was looking at you directly. I remember one of the teachings that I had from Marshall that really spoke to me was in the group, actually, in Switzerland. There were loads of people there, and I spoke up. I can't remember what I said, but what I do know is he looked at me for a moment and then just carried on with the group. And I felt really kind of like, oh, well, isn't he going to say something? But what happened to me is I realised that, what did I want? Yeah. I didn't make a request,
right.
Actually. I was just speaking out my thinking, really. So it helped me once I got past a little bit of feeling upset that I wasn't, acknowledged or something in the way that I'd expected. Helped me reflect on that and be more mindful around that. And of course, like I said, it's a never-ending journey. I mean, I'm a certified trainer, but I don't think I'm the super-duper expert. I'm working on it all the time.
So what kind of other modalities are you bringing into your training then?
Yeah, well, I trained alongside Biodanza. Nonviolent communication. I trained in Biodanza. Okay. So I'd done quite a lot of dancing. I mean, in my teenage wild years, clubbing and then going to that alternative club and then dancing 5 rhythms. So I loved to dance, but I'd kind of separated that from the personal development journey I was on, because I did a lot of NLP and NLP mastery and hypnotherapy and all of that kind of stuff. But and before I came to MVC, but I went to a festival and somebody, somebody offered a biodanza session, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced biodanza, which is quite unusual because there's a lot of connection in biodanza. And I realised in that dance, actually in that one vivencia, that, gosh, there's something in this that I need. It's speaking to me, It was the playfulness, it was being able to be a child again, but it was also quite confrontational for me, mostly actually with men in the dance, being, close up and quite sensual and that. It was kind of like, whoa, I don't know about this.
For listeners of biodanza, sometimes biodanza, you might hear it said by the South Americans, is it can be very intimate, can't it? It's got a kind of slightly, often almost gooey feel to it, I've found, and hand holding and eye gazing, and that sort of very un-English kind of close connection a lot of the time.
Yeah, there is some of that in biodanza, and I think we all teach it in our own way, although obviously the training is really extensive. And I know you had Julia Brightwell on, didn't you, as well? I trained with Julia, we were in the same school.
Yes.
And it's 3 years training, it's extensive training, it's a long journey. It's mostly people do more than that. I mean, I think it took me about 5 years, and then there's supervisions and a monography, so it's really extensive. And it's very, very deep work. And we work with 5 potentials, human potentials, which are lines of potential. It was created by a Chilean anthropologist, Rolando Toro. So we work with vitality, vital force for life. We work with sexuality and sensuality. We work with creativity, affectivity and transcendence. So they're the lines of identity that make up our identity. Well, that's, again, the teaching. I'm not saying that's the whole truth, the absolute truth, but they're kind of threads that, weave through us and are impacted by the experiences we have in life. So again, some of the teaching is that we are separated from our instinctive potential. And so biodanza is about working, just like MVC is actually, working with how we connect with ourselves, how we connect with each other in communication and in relationship, and how we connect with the whole group. And so the dances and the movement and the music that we use that's what happens. You engage at those 3 levels of relationship, and with those 5 lines of potential. And the journey is about integration of the identity. And I use biodanza with MVC, actually. I mean, I've just been here in Greece. I've been coming here for 10 years. I work as part of the holistic network, their Fintorn-inspired centres here on the mountain. And I've been running a week of nonviolent communication and biodanza. That's one of the things I've been doing. And so I do that, and I also sometimes have, used on intermediate days with biodanza, with nonviolent communication, and also use some of the biocentric exercises within my work and training. So, walking for cross-lateral, taking people, but using both sides of the brain, clapping, some of the things that we use. And I've started to use some of the generative postures as well.
Quick interruption to tell you about my book, Embodiment. Creatively named, hey? Actually, Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness. You can find this online at theembodimentbook.com. That's theembodimentbook.com. So this book is an introduction to the whole field. If you like these interviews, you'll probably love this book. Funny stuff, poems, personal stories from my life, illustrating what embodiment's all about, and loads for professionals in the field too. Top teaching tips, language tips, that kind of thing. Yeah, a real condensation of everything I've learned about embodiment, basically. So you can get pre-orders at Amazon.com, and if you just put in Embodiment Moving Beyond mindfulness, that's the name of the book, or go to theembodimentbook.com. On there, you'll see quotes from various teachers, a bunch of fun illustrations, and you can also get the first chapter completely free online at theembodimentbook.com. Enjoy, and back to the interview. What does biocentric mean, first of all?
Oh, so the biodanza is, the theory is that is underpinned by the biocentric principle that we are connected to life, that life is all important, that and that again reminds me of nonviolent communication. They're both about not wanting to do any harm to ourselves, to each other, to the planet, and that we are part of life. Mm-hmm. And that the way that we behave with each other, the motivation is about being life-serving, not destroying.
But sorry, the biocentric movements that come out of biodanza, is that?
Yes, it has, yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it. And sorry, I interrupted you there because I wanted to clarify.
That's okay. About. Yeah, because I'm so interested looking at some of your work, and I've been watching videos and things, I'm loving it. And really, I think it can enhance some of what I'm doing. And, and in biodanza, there are generative postures. Mm-hmm. So they're quite interesting because I know that you use postures, don't you, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not sure what a generative posture is, though. We use 26 embodied yoga principles postures, and interestingly, somebody sent me a picture of the founder of biodanza doing 2 of the same postures and said, you copied him. And I said, no, I absolutely didn't. I've only ever been to a couple of biodanza classes and we just danced, and I think independently came up with a couple of these archetypal shapes, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm sure you could easily come up with them because he came up with them through, saying that, I forget what he calls it now, but, in paintings over the centuries and seeing these postures and it appearing all over the place. So I can't even think off the top of my head how many there are. There aren't as many as the ones that you've got. But, some of them that I work with are asking and receiving and giving and intimacy with yourself, self-connection, that kind of thing, and a strong pose of identity. So, but there are a number of them.
I'm going to Google them now because I'm now it reminded me of this instance happened a few years ago when I was in Russia, and someone said, you copied him? I said, no, I didn't. So I'm super curious. And what I saw was one with his arms outstretched, and we call it taking a space pose.
Oh, yeah, like I think we call it Starman or something.
Okay, so it was a very similar pose. There was another one we call transcendence pose where the arms are straight up in the air. And
right, yeah.
It had a very similar name in this system as well. So, here we are. There's one. So
but I'm guessing exactly. They're universal poses. So, they're going to be repeated, aren't they?
Yeah.
Be seen and repeated.
Well, I also looked at a lot of art and architecture. And, if you look at, say, classical art of Jesus or Moses or the Mother Mary, they are in poses, because otherwise it wouldn't be resonant as art. Like, otherwise people wouldn't understand that emotionally and psychologically. And, artists are maybe doing a lot of this stuff implicitly, but
absolutely,
advertisers use them as well, slightly more crassly. But there's people who are wanting emotional impact, are using these poses in their art. So I'm a nightmare, my wife says, in any kind of sculpture park, because I'm just walking around looking for the poses, So it's I had a great time in Florence just the whole time, just pointing out different postures. But,
lovely. Yeah, it's all taking us back to, I guess, humanity, isn't it? How we express ourselves through gesture, and how. And we know, I know that at the moment that I take on that gesture or that posture, it gives me a certain feeling, so it changes my state.
Neutral, are they? They're not neutral. I think those sort of postures do several things. They change states, but they also generate different insights, I've noticed as well. So it's a state changer, but it can also give access to a part of us, which is like, oh, this part is uncomfortable, and that's interesting.
Absolutely,
normal mode, and then I'm getting access to another way of looking at the world through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can also release kind of memories that have not been fully integrated, maybe, you know, in a way that we can remember, or, you know, something that got a bit blocked. It's like all of a sudden, you know, that's people release some tears or, you know, and that's often why, I think, because we're releasing the posture or releasing the armor that was there and maybe haven't moved in that way or opened our heart in that way.
Yeah, the way I look at it is our sort of personalities held together by our habitual postures and breathing and all the rest of it. And when we challenge that, something new that can loosen things up and bring new kind of ways of looking at things. Are there any other sort of major somatic influences on your work? I mean, Biodanza, NVC, are there any other sort of pieces here that are worth laying out?
No, I mean, I guess I've done quite a lot of yoga, you know, in the past, not so much now. I would love to be doing it now because I'm not doing as much now. But when I was younger, I did quite a lot of yoga and NLP, actually, I would say. Although, yoga and NLP seem worlds apart from just saying that. But I think NLP really, probably that's more the somatic part because, you know, using submodalities.
Do you want to say what that is for listeners?
My work, yeah. So
start with what NLP is, because that's not as widespread in the States, I think, as in the UK and some places.
Okay, so neurolinguistic programming, neuro meaning the way that we process information, linguistic, our language, how what we think comes through our language, and programming, how that acts out. So, and it was developed by two psychologists, Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And I think there's another guy, actually, somebody told me who's come, and I don't know his name, who wasn't given credit or something, but I'm just mentioning him, and I apologize for not knowing his name. But they studied sort of a lot of fathers of psychology and counseling, like Carl Rogers and Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir, and what they did would take a lot of the processes or those moments where they got change, you know, those moments that were really effective, and from that created processes in neurolinguistic program that are effective for change, for supporting people.
Idea, right, of looking at sort of people that are really good in their field and saying, okay, let's break this down. What are they actually doing?
Absolutely. You explained that really clearly, Mark. Thank you so much. So, and submodalities are, so it helps me often, actually, if I'm working somebody, say, with NVC, which is a common thing, and I say something like they're talking about a situation, about their husband or their father or their child, and, you know, this particular situation happened. Maybe my husband said to me, be quiet at the dinner table or something, and I might say, how did you feel? And they say, I don't know. And, you know, that happens a lot with people, that it's really difficult to name the feeling. Yeah. So, you know, being able to take them into the body as one, I think, you know, that you don't really learn that as an NVC trainer so much, you know, to really take a breath and just feel where it is in the body. And if people are still really struggling, I might say something like, is it moving? Where it is, you know. So we start to really bring other submodalities in. Does it have a sound? Is it heavy or is it light? Does it have a texture? You know, so you can start to work with feelings or needs or memories in a way that is non-contextual, using, what we call in NLP submodalities. And I think I trained such a long time ago. I use bits of NLP, but it's kind of become merged within my work, you know, without sometimes naming exactly what it is.
Yeah, sometimes the submodalities, it can just be things like, I find useful, like someone say, do you see it this way? And
exactly.
If you're a hearing metaphor, then it links somehow. You know what I mean?
How do you feel it? How do you see it? Yeah.
Yeah, like as a general rule, I find it helpful just to stick with whatever a coachee is giving me as the metaphor.
Mm.
They might say, oh, this situation stinks. And instead of switching the metaphor to something like, oh, so does this not look right to you? I'll continue with their metaphor. Okay, so it's a really smelly place. Okay.
Yeah.
Something about that really helps with the empathy, I find.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other sort of main things you're using in coaching a lot, or things that you're, little embodied hacks that you're coming? Obviously, there's a whole embodied coaching field, but are there sort of particular things you're finding helpful in coaching?
I think mostly helping people with breath awareness, with regulation. That seems to be essential, especially because I'm mostly working with NLP, with MVC in coaching, and supporting people to apply that in their lives. And so first and foremost, grounding and breath awareness, and taking moments during the day to notice their feelings and needs in the body, and naming those if they can, or connecting to the sensations in their body and really having an awareness of that, so that they're more quickly able to come to that place and in the moment, in the workplace or wherever they are, in a situation where it's important for them to speak their truth. Yeah.
And what to say there? I think the bringing awareness to people's breath without any, yes, there's complicated breathing techniques, centering techniques, but just pointing clients back to their breath, that brings a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And I do that on all my coaching sessions, is just begin with doing some breathing together. So before we begin,
as a synchronizing practice, or as just a sort of calming practice, what's the intention there?
To invite them to come into the present moment, and be here now, and bring their awareness to the body and how they're sitting, and so that we're tuning in to what's alive with them and what they're bringing to the session in a full way, in an embodied way. I think that gives more space to really tune into the wholeness of themselves.
There is often with clients, I find, just a need to bring them to the present moment when they arrive to the session, because nearly always they're coming busy, frazzled, on the run. And also for myself, I do coaching sessions in the park nearby. Often I'm walking around and I'm on the phone, and the first thing I say to people is, okay, tell me where you are. That helps me understand their context, but it also gets them actually sort of looking around and say, well, I'm here, So are you sitting down or standing? And that again brings awareness to their posture. So just so I can get a sense of how you are today. And then there's also this sort of emotional hit. Like, I was in a really good mood. The sun's shining. I was walking through the park, really enjoying it. Sat on a bench, phoned one of my mentees at the agreed time, and they were just really glum. They were just in a very down place, and for good reasons. But it was like, and it sort of suddenly hit me in a way that I had to tune into, which may have been easier were it face to face. But I kind of consciously just stopped for a moment and was like, okay, this is what I need to tune into. This is the meeting going on here.
Yeah. So noticing where you are and how you are, and then taking the time to really hear them and tune into where they are. So how you come into sort of connection. Yeah.
As like a body hit.
Yeah.
I was contemplating something a bit rambly here, but this is quite a nice chat, so why not? I was just contemplating something today that when I first did NVC, it was like 15 years ago, maybe a bit more. And the idea of empathy was a fairly new idea. It was something for therapists. Obviously it had been around in Rogerian psychotherapy and things like that. But since then, the idea has spread. Obama, for example, was the first president to talk about empathy. And the idea is spread to companies, and it's sort of in common culture. Like, I interrupted someone the other day when we were talking, a young person, millennial, and they got quite upset with me. They said, you can't interrupt me. And I said, well, yeah, I can, and I'm going to. And they'd sort of grown up almost in a culture of and it's probably a much better culture in some ways, but for them, it was like, you never interrupt, you always wait for the other person to finish speaking, and that's not the culture I grew up in. And it's sort of, for better and for worse, this empathy culture seems to be disseminating. Though I'm also hearing in this other trend at the moment of, you don't have to have empathy for the bad guys who are politically on the other side. Like, so, do you see what I mean? So there's a few trends around empathy, some of which it's spread, and others is like blocks to empathy. Like, I don't have to empathize with that person, or I'm highly sensitive, I'm too empathic. That's another one I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Hearing that.
Yeah, I need to protect myself or something. It's like I'm an empath, this kind of... it's interesting what you're saying about companies and young and millennials, because I guess we've been teaching something a bit different in that, of course, everything's about connection at the moment, isn't it? You know, you can, on the internet, and, you know, we can talk to anybody anytime and Skype with them and see, you know, all these things on the internet. However, I think, you know, what's happened is a lot of the filters have gone. Because especially young kids, I mean, teenagers, there's some really challenging and very painful things happening for teenagers in that comments are made that maybe wouldn't be as lightly, I'm guessing, made if you were face to face.
I had one just yesterday, Tracy, and I really thought I shared quite a personal piece on Facebook about the trauma healing process. And, you know, there was a barrier. I hadn't got into everything, but I was like, you know, I wanted to share something about this experience, to say, hey, guys, this is worth doing if you have this experience. And one person who I'd never met, their comment was total vomit. And I actually thought it was just a mistake. So I said, excuse me, is this on the right thread? And they went, yep, that's at you, total vomit. And then they had some really strong opinions about me through following me on the internet, never talked to them, never met them. And they just threw them at me. And part of me just wanted to go around this guy's house and smash his head in. And I really thought, if that guy was in a pub, there's no way you would interrupt a conversation with a group of friends having at a table and just put your head in and go, you're speaking shit. You know, that there's something about that internet. And unusually, this guy actually lives in my town. And I said, you know, would you like to meet? And of course he didn't. But it was strange that people hide behind this sort of perceived safety. Part of me kind of wants to make an example of one of these. I want to turn up at one of their house and just sort of say, look, what are you doing? You know, this is not how you talk to people. Like you don't say this to people in real life. Come on. I mean, you'd have to be pretty awful human being to interrupt someone's conversation about trauma with their friends by saying it was total vomit. And I get that fairly often. And sometimes I'm provocative and people say, well, kind of, you know, I deserve it. You know, I'm the, I was wearing a short skirt of opinions kind of thing. I deserve it is what I get quite often. But in this case, it was nothing controversial, nothing provocative, nothing offensive, really just sharing from the heart. And still this guy came in and I went, I was having a great day, so it didn't really get to me particularly. But part of me was like, what's going on with that?
Yeah. It sounds like it was still quite a shock, a surprise. Yeah,
I didn't respond until this morning. I slept on it, and I kind of went, okay, how do I want to respond to this? You know, it's just something I've been learning to do, is take that pause. You know, but yeah, it's I just came to my mind there. But it's the anonymity of the internet. Obviously, this is the trolling phenomena.
Yeah,
empathy deficit kind of thing. You know, that's quite a thing.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And I mean, kids, you know, we've got very, very young children using the internet and disconnecting, you know, parents, I mean, I can understand why, but, you know, it's great to have your kids quiet for a while, but playing on Fortnite for hours and hours and hours, you know. I mean, yes, there's other kids on there, but I think all these things are, I don't know, I don't think it's just my age, actually. I think there is real empathy deficit. It is difficult. It seems more and more mental health problems, younger people with anxiety. I've been working with a lot of people in organisations, you know, around connection and really doing some work with listening and hearing each other and connecting with customers. And, you know, they absolutely love it. But these are skills that are not happening at school. I think our education system is it's pressured, big classes, lots of things that teachers are coping with. And so there doesn't seem to be an emphasis on time to hear each other, time to solve problems and work through that and understand each other. Of course, there's little bits of it, but not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that was in some ways never part of formal education, but it was part of informal sort of social skills acquisition, which is happening less or in a different way. And another one I've come across a lot is a sort of extreme conflict avoidance, like the inability to have difficult conversations. The sort of, what do they call it? Ghosting, they call it in dating, where people just disappear. I'm told that's utterly the norm now. And I've even had colleagues kind of say, okay, I resigned by email and I don't want to talk about it. And, I don't like you anymore, so we're not talking. And I go, wow, you don't even want a conversation to tell me I'm an asshole? Like the difficult conversations seem intolerable to people now, or maybe it's the disposability that people think I don't need to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I was just wondering, actually, just going back for a moment, because I'm aware that, how are you with that guy that made that comment, and how are you with that? Because it sounds like you're getting quite a few.
Oh, they come and go. A lot of the time I just ignore them. I think living well is the best revenge. But in this case, I might do something about it because this person's local and he crossed the line. So, I'm not, as I said, a hardcore non-violent person. And there may have been a line crossed there. So I feel like the hiding behind anonymity to the internet is not a strategy I respect. But also, if you're in the public eye, if you're doing things a lot, there's a certain amount of just developing a thick skin and just pressing block and delete. That I've learned is just okay. This person isn't really interested in dialogue. It's giving them a kick to try and wind me up, rather than give them that little kick. I'm just going to delete them and block them. And that's my general response to an insult from a random person on the internet. Is just to say, okay, I owe this person nothing, so block, delete, that's that. But if it's someone that's actually in my life, just so I don't seem like a hypocrite from what I just said, I will actually genuinely say, my rule is to pick up the phone if there's any kind of online conflict and actually speak face to face, if at all possible, or at least on the phone, because I find that helps resolve the conflict much quicker. I find with email and text, it generates rather quickly. So with people who I have some investment in the relationship, or, even people I've just met once, I feel deserve at least that, I move up that sort of scale of connection and voice message, phone call, face to face. Tracy, we're almost out of time here, and I don't want this to be sort of focused on my strategies here. So, any other sort of top tips for us around communication?
Being kind to yourself. I think that's a really big one, and it's not always easy. As we said before, the self-critic can be strong, so taking time to be as kind to ourselves as we would to a young child or somebody that we love, and to really listen quietly. It takes quietness to listen to the language that the body speaks. At least that's what I find. There's a lot of noise going on, and I need to take that quiet time, and time in nature too, to hear what my body is telling me and to listen to that. And I do think, that part of ourselves has the utmost wisdom above all. And to integrate that enriches our life, enriches humanity, enriches the way that we relate with each other.
Okay, this is feeling like a nice place to start to wrap up. People can find you at Tracy Seed, like seed and tree, Tracy Seed.
Yeah.
Great brand. I'm assuming that's your real name, Seed.
It's my married name. It's actually not, but from a long, long time ago. But I kept it. It seemed like my kids have got it, and everyone says to me it's a great work name. So
it is for what you do. Yeah, Tracy, very normal and approachable. Seed, the possibility. There's something in there. I like that. Okay, Tracy, any sort of final parting message about the body generally, or about communication for our listeners?
Practice mindful breath awareness regularly, every day, even for a few moments. It Yeah, I think that's a key practice.
The foundation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for speaking again. It's nice to speak with you.
I really hope the recording's fine for this one. I really do.